What does Hello Neighbor hide off camera and behind the scenes during the break-in? Hello Neighbor was an ambitious title that would be later followed by numerous games, books, and even a TV show. It all starts with a chance encounter. A young boy witnesses his neighbor locking someone in his basement, and the impromptu infiltration leads to a series of increasingly unsettling and wacky events. So let's break the game. We'll analyze and break down how the neighbor works, explore out of bounds, and even delve into some of the strange aspects of this game to really dissect it. Our adventure also will take us to visit the nightmarish glitchy error world. So I hope you enjoyed this long overdue game-breaking adventure. The game starts with a short cutscene where our protagonist, Nikki, kicks a ball down the street. It rolls all the way until stopping in front of the neighbor, Mr. Peterson's house. From within, screams and the sounds of a struggle can be heard. Nikki creeps closer to witness his neighbor having just locked someone in his basement. The neighbor notices and catches Nikki. Waking back up on the other side of the road, the game begins for real. The player must find a way to get into that basement. This means breaking through windows, looting keys and tools from the house, all while avoiding the neighbor, who is billed as an advanced AI, which learns from your actions. After entering the basement, things only get stranger. A door behind a washing machine leads to a singular room with a bed, and no captive in sight. Jumping out through the window reveals this room is a set, and there's a whole complex down below the house. The neighbor continues to stalk the player, acting a bit more aggressive than before. Opening the way forward leads to an underground tunnel, which you're eventually chased down by the neighbor. The tunnel ends at another door, this one protected by multiple colored locks. With no way out, the neighbor catches Nikki, and suddenly the reckless intruder has become another captive. So we'll pause here, rewind time, and begin breaking down the many aspects of the game, starting with the title screen. The title screen is a simple scene, meant to somewhat resemble the locked basement door. Periodically, the neighbor's shadow moves across the wall from left to right. Pulling back the camera reveals that he's fully animated, looking around, almost stumbling, then rushing off where he disappears, which occurs entirely out of view. There's also a couch to the left, which casts a shadow you can barely see on the left of the title screen. Moving the camera around, it seems the wall has a texture on the back, along with wooden beams that make it obvious it's a set piece. During the opening cutscene, adjusting the camera reveals that after leaving his A pose, Nikki's running up to the ball for a very long time. After kicking it, cutscene Nikki is replaced with playable Nikki. Down at the neighbor's house, Mr. Peterson is A-posing to the left of the living room's window. Once his animation starts, it seems there is no one else to be seen. When shoved, the neighbor clips through the living room wall, and when the screen fades to black, the basement door is replaced with the one used for the neighbor's animation. When this is happening, Nikki is crouched by the window and his head is rotated back. This is probably so the cutscene's camera doesn't clip into his face. As for the main game, the neighborhood stretches on quite far in every direction. You can get glimpses of it during gameplay, but let's actually explore it properly. Not far from the invisible bounds of the play space, the infrastructure starts breaking down. You can find cars idling their engines, clipping into each other on the road that ends just past them. There are many repeated instances of houses dotting the landscape, most farther away ones having about as much detail as a cardboard cutout. That's pretty standard and efficient, but it makes a few distinct landmarks stick out like a sore thumb. There is a white and gold monument in the middle of nowhere, the piece in the center looking like two hands clasped together. Nearby is a supermarket, which includes nearly incomprehensible writing on its sign and windows. This is actually a trend across the whole area. All the writing is in English that's been jumbled up. One interpretation is that the point of view character, Nikki, is dyslexic. That's why we see Wayron Krubs on this building, when it's actually Raven Brooks. Not sure what Yudolsk means. Speaking of, this building has a textureless white room floating behind the building. It's empty and serves no apparent purpose. Elsewhere, there's a church and cemetery. On another hill is an industrial building with white and orange smokestacks stretching into the sky. Near the lake is a blue building labeled Lopais, aka Police, and there's also a white and red building called Sogtipal, or Hospital. This one actually has a front and back entrance. How convenient. Lastly, far off in the distance are what looks like skyscrapers. As you get closer, it seems they're actually black pillars with white squares that float in front of them to give the illusion of depth. Turning our attention back to the neighbor's house, there is a large unused section between the bathroom and workshop, which is just begging to be converted into a walk-in closet. If the neighbor spent some time renovating, he could definitely raise his property's value. The second floor also has a lot of empty space between the rectangular rooms and slanted roof. Under the house, we can see where the grass mesh has been warped to make space for the basement steps. There's also a rough wooden door, a bit of wall, and a fence floating nearby. You never know when you're going to need to swap stuff out to make repairs. By far, the most interesting part of this house is actually the neighbor himself. When not chasing the player otherwise on alert, the neighbor will meander across his house, swapping between activities quite often. In no particular order, he'll move from room to room, opening and closing doors as he does. In the bedroom, he can flop onto the bed and have a quick snooze. In the bathroom, he may use the sink to wash his gloved hands or mess with the bathtub. He can also wash his hands in the kitchen, but he does this from a few feet away. He even kicked aside a chair to get into position. Actually, given enough time to himself, he'll knock aside other pieces of furniture. With his dynamic pathing and this game's focus on interactable physics-based objects, it makes sense that he'd be programmed to move stuff out of the way. However, I haven't entered his house. He just did all this on his own. Most often, he'll pass through the living room, where he can do a few different things. He might nap on the couch, in which case he wakes up with an odd animation. It's almost as if his body starts moving before he fully wakes up. He can also turn on his TV and laugh along at the program, though the TV only ever shows static. The neighbor will also stop in place and do some stretches, or even jog in place. I guess he has to stay limber for whenever it's kid catching time. Now, I wanted to see what would happen if I started removing some stuff. How would the neighbor's movements change? Well, I zapped away his bed after he already decided to take a nap, and he just floated in the air while snoozing. It's like the evil in his body is keeping him airborne. After waking back up, he kept patrolling like nothing happened. When he sat down to watch his shows, I removed the sofa and TV. His sitting animation wasn't interrupted, and he was able to stand up just fine, but then the game just stopped. It might be because his programming wanted him to turn off the TV, but the object no longer exists, so the game ran into an error and crashed. Removing the furniture before the neighbor interacts with them will cause him to simply wander around, which isn't very interesting. As it turns out, the best way to mess with him is to remove the doors. You'd think that would let him freely move through the house, but it actually breaks his pathfinding. Without any doors, his only valid way from room to room is to break the glass and climb through windows. This also resulted in the neighbor stopping to stare at the player disapprovingly way more often. Speaking of disapproval, whenever the neighbor spots the player, he'll immediately give chase. This will only stop if he either catches you, or you go past the road's halfway point. While you can't really fight him, the neighbor can be slowed by chucking stuff at him. The bigger the object, the longer he'll take to recover. Both the player and neighbor run at about the same speed, but that doesn't mean you can run laps without some consequences. When far enough away, the neighbor will pelt you with tomatoes, which temporarily obscure your vision, and jars of glue, which leaves a puddle that slows your movement. As mentioned before, the neighbor can and will kick or push objects out of his way, but he won't even let closed windows stand in his way. He'll leap right through, breaking the glass, even when it's not necessary. I think he just likes doing it at this point. If the player remains out of reach long enough, the neighbor can actually pull out a vacuum. It's no Poltergeist 3000, but it is strong enough to move the player. This is a bit rare, because more often, the neighbor will opt to wildly run and jump at the player, even if it proves useless. After you've spent some time attempting to break in, the neighbor will take some precautionary measures. Usually this means boarding up certain windows, forcing you to find new means of entry. He can also prop buckets over partially open doors to act as an alarm. Jumping forward a bit, during the basement sequence, the neighbor will start placing bear traps in front of doors, which seems like quite the escalation. Now that we've discussed the neighbor's capabilities, I wanted to start duplicating the man and see what would happen. Unfortunately, the game cannot handle having multiple active neighbors. As soon as he attempts to do anything, the game will crash. Still, it is possible to mess with the extra neighbors by avoiding the original guy. They won't do much, just idling in place. They have colliders and inherently push the player character away. That means we can use them as very impractical walls. Here we have Nicky trapped in a cage of his own making, and this is a very rough floating bridge, which even includes some neighbor-shaped handrails on the sides. Moving across it is quite difficult and bumpy, made worse by the fact that these extra neighbors can randomly decide to catch the player. I call this one the mosh pit. I won't bother counting them, but it took roughly this many copies until the game started to lag. Whenever I approached the main neighbor, even with only a few copies on the street, the game also got a bit choppy. Perhaps all these extra neighbors are causing proximity vignette and sound effects to multiply, which is quite strange. Moving on, object physics are a major part of this game's identity and design. You're expected to stack boxes to reach new places, and throw objects to distract or attack. As such, each object has weight to them, and collision that interacts with the world around them. When it comes to objects interacting with the player and vice versa, things can get weird. The black bags of trash in front of the neighbor's yard are a good example. If you run into them, the bags might get knocked away. Just as often, they can cause the player to get rotated around or knocked aside. It's also very possible for them to launch the player high in the air, far enough to soar above the neighborhood's rooftops, which can be a bit deadly. At times, you might also hear a soft crunch noise and respawn. When this happens, it's because the player got tossed so hard, they kinda died on the spot. Across playthroughs, I think it's safe to say that these trash bags have a higher kill count than the neighbor himself. Other objects can also be dangerous. It just comes down to how their collision overlaps and interacts with the players. You can use the television to launch yourself somewhat reliably, which is actually a speedrun strategy to access the basement without doing a single puzzle. If you want to do this at home, just place a TV facing the door and run into the angled part in the back. It might take a few attempts, but it just kinda works. Windows are also less of an obstacle than you might expect, because you can pick up objects by looking through the gap between the window pane and wall. You can also toss objects past doors much the same way. But grabbing items doesn't seem possible, because trying to do so instead looks through the keyhole. To take it a step further, you can actually toss most bigger objects directly through a wall, simply by standing close enough to it when releasing the item. This is likely because every object is placed in front of the player and then given momentum. So when they're big enough, they are already mostly through the wall, and the game pushes them to the other side no problem. A good way to practice is with Nikki's house. Look at all the stuff I was able to phase through the wall. Speaking of walls, with a bit of movie magic, we can straight up delete the walls, floors, and basically every other part of the neighbor's house. This is a great way to visualize just how many different objects make the now missing house feel like a home. It also completely breaks the neighbor, nearly trapping him in place. Basically, every non-grabbable object, like the rug, kitchen table, wardrobe, and so on, become an obstacle for the neighbor's pathfinding. A bunch of the physics objects drop to the ground, but some others remain floating. This is a result of efficient programming. There's no reason to calculate the physics of something if it hasn't moved yet. However, we can use this trait with cardboard boxes to our advantage. If we spawn a bunch into one spot, as soon as one box starts moving, it collides with another, then another, and so on. This creates a physics bomb, which is great for raining cardboard onto the neighborhood. I take it one step further. We know the neighbor loves kicking stuff in his way, so I froze him in place while I set up my trap. From a safe distance, aka right behind this very breakable window, I waited for the magic to happen. The neighbor moved back through the living room, touched a box, and boom. The boxes exploded out, busting the windows and littering the room with otherwise harmless cardboard. Get pranked, bro! Switching gears a bit, let's talk about the player. You see Nicky in the opening cutscene, and his limbs during gameplay. But for whatever reason, his full character model is always rendered in. You just don't see his head, neck, or upper torso because the camera is positioned just in front of the chin. All of Nicky's animations are a bit stilted. Looking up and down makes him bend his back nearly 90 degrees in either direction, which cannot be healthy. His arms remain straight and out of view unless crouching, in which case he holds his hand out awkwardly, which allows it to remain within the view of the camera. As a consequence of the player's model being fully visible, the animation for hiding under the bed is especially cursed. His entire body drops down a clip through the floor, then slides into position. I can't imagine looking under the bed and seeing that stare back at me with those lifeless eyes. If you're curious, Nicky holds objects quite normally, with the strength of 10 grown men. No child should be able to chuck entire armchairs like that. Now, I know I've been focusing on this area for a while, but there's still more to show off. So before we take a look at the basement, let's touch on the other locations you can visit during this phase of the game. After getting captured, or otherwise respawning, you may appear in a brand new area. This is one of the game's nightmare sequences, which provides clues towards the neighbor's backstory. Through a window, we witness the neighbor and an unseen woman get into a car and drive off. And then we see the immediate aftermath of a car crash. This entire sequence takes place in an enclosed box below the neighborhood. Before the first scene plays, the neighbor is A-posing below the floor, and only the car's doors and trunk are visible. The neighbor and car pop into place as the animation starts, which always occurs before you can round the corner and look through the window. Once the car finishes driving off, the 3 floating car pieces are back at the start. which is perfectly blocked by the wall. For the other scene, the neighbor is in his sitting, looping animation, teleporting into place when the player moves down the hallway. The second nightmare is much more subtle with whatever it's trying to convey. A large shadow passes overhead, and then the gigantic neighbor passes by before suddenly reappearing and catching the player. Changing the lighting reveals that the neighbor walks to cast this first shadow, and then is burying something using a shovel for the second shadow. In the second room, the neighbor walks straight through a doorway with no opening, before teleporting into place for the grab. As for the other location, take a look at this. Left in the game all this time is an Unreal Engine missing script error icon, which is just past an invisible wall behind this blue house. It's inaccessible, except for the brief sequence before running down the road after the ball. If you toss an object or yourself into the circle, a horrible noise will occur. It takes you into a white void, where walls with numbers can be seen in the moments before respawning. Much like the nightmares, this actually takes place below the neighborhood, but it's normally impossible to tell because of the fog. Finally, let's explore the basement. Outside the complex of walls and doors, we can see a green tile platform with a single flashlight. Out near the tunnel is a copy of the neighbor endlessly running, which is likely what's used for the chase sequence. Looking at the basement from this angle, all the playable space is focused between the tunnel and entrance room. The fences block the player from exploring further, so all you have is your imagination to fill in whatever exists out in the shadows. Turns out all that space is mostly empty, aside from a few candles and this one freakishly tall chair. There's also a singular door that leads to nothing, blocked by a chair. I wasn't able to remove the chair during normal gameplay, but I did toss plenty of objects into the void while trying. As for the chase sequence, here's a few oddities. As soon as it starts, the running neighbor is unleashed and immediately falls off into the void. At the same time, a T-posing neighbor starts the door opening animation and teleports into the place behind the door. As soon as you're caught, everything is reset and the chase starts again. When you're caught while close enough to the triple locked door, the area will change to the next act's neighborhood. But that's a discussion for later. Now, let's finally talk about the error world. This is a secret location you can reach, which was discovered as part of the Hello Neighbor ARG, or alternate reality game. This played out while the game was being developed, conveyed through QR codes and other hidden messages. I won't get into the particulars too much, but instead focus on the error world itself. It can be accessed by starting a new playthrough and not touching any of the controls for exactly 600 seconds, or 10 minutes. This sounds like a myth you'd hear shared around the playground at school, but it's real. You'll know it worked when a glowing green cube appears off in the distance, in front of the player's house. Entering this cube shows a message simply stating console enabled. If you're playing on PC, you can open up the command line and run AI error dumping equals 0, which spawns the neighbor in front of you. He speaks to you through console messages, counting down until corruption begins. This loads you into an area named Error World, a version of the normal game map, which has been twisted and warped in all kinds of ways. Many textures have been shuffled around, all of the trees are flipped upside down and floating in the sky, and there are loads of objects out of place and scaled weirdly. The neighbor's house is still recognizable, and it is possible to retrieve the red key and open the basement door, but there is no loading zone, so that's kinda pointless. The goal of this place is to assist the neighbor in achieving something by reaching the various glowing green cubes and entering specific commands. One can be found on the supermarket's roof, accessed via an Unreal script missing teleporter in the player's house. After the first command, the neighbor's arms will teleport around in a strange way. Another cube sits against the skyscraper, which you can reach by jumping off an insanely fast moving platform. This command causes the neighbor's legs to start glitching, his walking animation starts without him wanting it to, and for a moment, his arms and legs are swapped. Gross. Another cube rests atop the moon, which can be reached by hopping into a trampoline. This command causes the neighbor's spine to start malfunctioning, so to speak. It seems the more commands we enter, the more corrupt the neighbor gets. But he's literally asking for this. The next command starts messing with his head, making it disappear, spin around, and even become massive for a moment. The final command seems to cause the neighbor to warp between shifting into an A pose and standing completely still. The game loads back to the title screen, and while it seems like nothing's changed, doing all of this has caused one major difference. If you continue, select Act, or Load, you'll find yourself playing in a game without the neighbor. He's just gone. You can still break into the basement and explore underground, but aside from a few odd moments, you'll be utterly alone. The takeaway of all of this, I believe, is that by accessing the error world and entering all those commands, you help the neighbor's AI reset itself and essentially escape the game. Everything will be back to normal as soon as you select New Game from the title screen. But with that, we've looked at just about everything behind the scenes and hidden inside the opening sequence of Hello Neighbor. I hope you've enjoyed this lighthearted home invasion, and hope to see all of you very soon. Thanks for watching, and cheers!